Hello, welcome back, and let's just get started on programming these robots to do something. I'm going to go ahead and open up Arduino, and let's just start with the Pro Mini. I already have a piece of code, obviously in this case, and I'll pull it down here so we can take a look at it and move it over. All right, so what have I done here? As I explained in the last video, I have the sharp sensor hooked up on both robots to A0. I have the infrared sensors on both robots hooked up to A1, and I have the left infrared sensor hooked up to A2 on both robots. Here's a piece of code that I'll post, and you can see that I've created some constants, some variables. I've created three variables that I'm going to use to collect the data that we gather. I have one that I've labeled F sharp for the front sharp sensor, and I have two of them, the left and right IR sensors down here. I've also created three constants, and as I just said, I have the sharp hooked up to A0, I have the right one hooked up to A1, and I have the left one hooked up to A2 on both robots. Okay, so it's going to be conserved. The beginning of this system here, the setup, the first thing I'm going to need to do is set up some serial communication. So it's serial begin 9600. I've also created a subroutine. I like subroutines. It makes your code ultimately much nicer. And the other thing is that when our robots begin to move and they're out there in the real world, we may not need to in fact, we may not want to have the robot wait around to display data. So by putting the print sensors in its own subroutine, that means that once we get our robots moving and you've debugged them and everything else, you can just ram out one line and all of those delays from printing just disappear. But I've got it set up so you can see it's going to print what the text front sharp is equal to, and then it's going to print out the data, and it's going to give it a new line feed, that ln, and then it's going to do that with the left one, the right one, and ultimately it's going to create a new line which has a blank space, so we're going to get a space in our text. And now we get down to what's really happening. We got the loop. Okay, so the first thing it's going to do is it's going to say, hey, what's the analog value of that sensor that's hooked up to the front sharp pin? Okay, and it's going to, delays may or may not be necessary. I like to give, especially when my robot is not moving around and I'm not in some sort of competition, I can see no reason why not to let it chill for 15 milliseconds. Ultimately, we might take those out and or reduce them quite a bit. And I do the same thing with the right IR and the left IR. And then before I exit the loop, I'm going to call upon that print sensors, and it's going to print all those values, and then we're going to go to the delay. Now keep in mind, I have two robots here, so let's program first the Pro Mini. I have the 5 volt based on the ATmega 328, and I said that it was hooked up to COM4. Alright, and let's load it up. And very good. And Control Shift M launches that serial window that we love. Notice I'm not getting any values here. It's like all gibberish and bogus. Well, that's because on this board, as well as many of them, the older basic stamp boards and BX24 boards, they needed an external 5 volt power supply. There is 5 volts provided by the Pro Mini, but older boards oftentimes don't tie that into the central bus. So I actually got to power it up from batteries. Okay, so now I've powered it up, and I'm starting to get some real data. If I move my hand, although you can't quite see that there, you can see I'm getting variables in the front sharp, and I always keep one of these things around, a business card here with some electrical tape. And if I put it underneath the left sensor, you can see I get a 450, move it to the white, I get 40, we'll do that with the right. 660, move it to the white. Okay, 41. Excellent. This works beautifully. I'm going to close this. And now let's go ahead and switch that over to a Teensy 3.0. And it's hooked up to COM 3. And let's load it up. This one's going to launch that little Teensy bootloader software here shortly. We're going to see it pop up. There it is. First time it does it, I usually push the button anyway, but we could have tested it. And there we are. Let's go Control Shift. Whoops. Sorry. Let's highlight this window. Control Shift M. And lo and behold, now keep in mind well, let me move this window out of the way. Okay. This board does have it set up so it can draw off the 5-volt coming from the USB cable, so I don't need to power it up. In fact, it's physically locked. I can't turn on the power supply to the logic while it's plugged in. It won't push over. Okay, so that being said, we get sort of the similar effect. Move my hand in, I can increase that front sharp. Let's go over here, we'll slide the card in. I get a really high left value, drops back down. Come over here, it's low. Raise it, it goes up. So you can imagine right off the bat, as soon as we get wheels moving, we can use this thing for line following or sumo battles, all kinds of stuff. And we're going to get right on it right after this. I will see you soon.